And as I reference this little boy, I want to point out that I reference him as this little boy simply because it wasn't his mother, Jochebed, who named him. It was Pharaoh's daughter who named him. And it was after Jochebed had returned Moses, this little boy, to Pharaoh's daughter as her child. She could either hang on to her son or she could let him go. And for 3 months, she held on. When she realized she couldn't hold him anymore, she let him go. The scripture tells us she realized her child was a fine child. Now, I cannot tell you what this means. And I can't say what he would have looked like or what he would have sounded like if he was a fine child. But the Hebrew word for fine in this passage is the same, or is very close relation to the Hebrew word God used in the creation story to call good. For 3 months, she lived with this fine child. I cannot even begin to imagine the struggle she went through. Can you imagine the fear in her life that Pharaoh, by wanting all of the babies killed, the whole fear that she lived in daily, the fear that overtook her, possibly, on some occasions. Could you imagine the feeling of loneliness that she had, hiding such a huge secret, a baby that could have had her and her family killed if the child was found? The emotions and feelings inside of her were probably very strong and very intense. I can imagine there would also be some hatred towards Pharaoh. Who would want to kill babies, specifically male babies? They're the ones who lead the society. They're the ones who are in control. They're the stronger ones. So why kill them? Many questions, possibly many questions without answers, fill your minds. I believe these feelings are very universal. Letting go of whatever it is, and in your mind you can think about it and you can name it for yourself. Some examples in the biblical history. The Israelites had to let go of their idols in order to worship God. And this was a constant struggle for them. One day worshiping God, one day finding other gods to worship. They also let go of being set apart by asking Samuel for a new king. They wanted to be like the other nations. They wanted a king in front of them that they could see, one that they could relate to on a more personal level than God. The disciples had to let go of their families, and some of them maybe even their lifestyles, in order to follow Jesus. And speaking of Jesus, he had to let go of himself in order to be the sacrifice on the cross for us. He gave himself up for you. He gave himself up for me. He let go of in order to embrace the will of his Father. In Romans 12:1, Paul tells us, "Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship." Paul tells us that we are supposed to offer our bodies up as living sacrifices. We should let go of ourselves in order to give ourselves over to God. This is one of those hard things to do, letting go of ourselves. But what does that mean? Letting go can also be said as sacrificing. It can also be said as forfeiting the rights to ourselves. That means letting go of our pride, letting go of our selfishness, letting go of our stuff, letting go of our anger, letting go of our past, letting go of fear, letting go of sin in our lives, letting go of revenge for the love of money. And the list could continue. We could sit here for hours and continue saying the things that we should let go of. But it's hard to let go. And at no point am I going to tell you that it's easy. And in my opinion, letting go may never be easy, but it comes with a price. That price is that in letting go, we gain something. For example, we gain a certain amount of freedom by letting go of our pride. We can become humble, and that humility allows us to become more of a servant instead of thinking more highly of ourselves than we should. I cannot define for you or for me what we will gain when we decide to let go. And I cannot define that because each situation is going to be different. We're all going to be faced with something different. even if we are faced with similar situations, it's still going to be different the way we handle it, the way you handle it, the way I handle it. I can only tell you that when we finally decide to let go, God is still going to be standing there, just as He was when we were hanging on. But I think, in my opinion, that God will still be standing there, ready to help us out just a little bit more, because we're telling Him we can no longer do it by ourselves. We are letting go of the rights of us, and we are becoming a little more dependent on God. In the story of Jochebed, Moses' mother, her letting go allowed Moses to experience a different culture growing up, one that could have helped him when trying to help free the Israelites from the Egyptian captivity that they were under. Moses, the great leader of the Israelites, led the Israelites away to the Promised Land, and in that process he was given which we still uphold today. Though he did not enter the Promised Land, Moses was able to go to the edge of it, and he was able to look into it. And as a great leader, thousands of years later, we still look at him, and we still, even when he gave God excuses why he did not want to be the leader, God worked with him, and He made provisions. And together, the Israelites came out of that Egyptian captivity. Going back to the Romans 12 passage, reading verse 2. Do not be conformed any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is good, pleasing, and perfect will. Paul tells us in verse 2 that it is by the renewing of our minds that we are transformed. And we are brought into God's way of thinking. This allows us to test and approve what God's will is. But Paul goes on to tell us it's not just God's will, but God's will that is pleasing and good and perfect. We must allow our minds to be changed in order to let go of something. How else are we going to let go? If we do not think we need to let go, then why would we? It has to start in our minds, and it travels to our hearts. And then if we allow it, we can transform our lives and become a lifestyle. The decision to let go has to be ours. No one else can make it for us. We have to dig into each of our own selves in order to find out what it is that we need to let go of. We can ask for, and hopefully we do ask for, God's to be let go. And when we ask, why would God not show us? If we are truly seeking to follow Him more, would not asking Him allow us to find a new way to walk after Him? No one can make that decision for us. It has to be a personal thing. People can offer us advice, but it is up to us to ultimately decide to follow that advice, or to not follow it, depending on the situation. But it is a personal thing. Letting go is between you and God, and letting go is between me and God. Please do not hear me say that in letting go, we will become the next great leader, such as Moses, or that each of us will be given many good things. Letting go doesn't mean we will succeed according to our own plan, but instead that we will be taken care of in those unexpected. I challenge you today, and as you continue in your weeks, to look inside of who you are, surface level and on deeper issues. Ask God's guidance. What is it today that you need to let go of?